Italy is a country steeped in tradition, art. We love the art, fashion. We like the fashion, food. We love the food. And like many other parts of the world, there's been a long-running debate in Italy over media control. Many trace it back to when the late Silvio Berlusconi first came to power. Here's Al Jazeera's The Listening Post.
Using his media and using his money, he was able to build the largest political party in Italy, and he became prime minister. And he used his media power, taking advantage of the fact that in Italy there are no laws regulating media concentration and the use of the media for political purposes. This has been a key feature for its political success, but is also a lesson not to be forgotten in Western-style democracy.
And in 2022, Berlusconi's party went into coalition under right-wing Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Al Jazeera said Berlu paved the way for what it called modern demagogues, not just Meloni, but also Hungary's Viktor Orban, Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro, Britain's Boris Johnson, and of course, Donald Trump in America. There has been concern over Meloni's government's influence on public broadcaster RAI. Here's what a website fan page caught at a recent protest.
Siamo qui a tutela di un principio costituzionale fondamentale, quello della libertà di stampa. Basta con questa tele Meloni, non meritano di vedere la loro professionalità messa a servizio di una macchina di propaganda per il governo.
Who better to hear it from than Italian journalists themselves? Let's bring in our guest, Gabriele di Donfrancesco, a freelance journalist based in Rome, and joining us from the newsroom in Milan, Serena Danna, a deputy editor at the online news site Open. Hello to you both, and thank you for joining us. Gabriele, I want to begin with you. What spurred the controversy at RAI, and how did it begin?
So, it began many months ago. You should understand that the public broadcaster RAI has always been under the direct control of the parliament, has been under the direct control of the parliament since the 70s. And the government has always had a say in that. So when the Meloni government came to power with a high majority in the parliament, controlling both houses, the prime minister could basically do whatever she wanted with RAI. So she started picking his own picks for top jobs in RAI and started changing the programming. Last month, journalists from the public broadcaster went on strike for what they called a blatant influence of the government in newscasts. And what they speak out against was, a push for a constant positive coverage of the government. And this can vary greatly. It can be censorship during programs with hosts that cannot say what they would like to say and cannot express negative views on the government. And it can also include news that are being aired on newscasts with, a strange take on them.
It could also be, I guess, nonstop political rallies where there's no nuance, no commentary added to that, Gabriele. Serena, the International and European Federation of Journalists, wrote to the European Commission. It called RAI a megaphone for the government. Is that how you feel?
Well, honestly, what I think is that RAI always used to be a megaphone for the government. So let's be clear about this. There are some structural problems that affect RAI since the beginning, and also many companies have to do with bad organization of the company, and also, of course, the political control at RAI is made by party of all colors from probably the beginning. So career paths with RAI have always been influenced by politics, to the point that channels, in the past were distributed between majority and opposition. So I think that what is really new at RAI is the cultural revolution that this government, that Meloni government, is trying to make, which claims that there were, such sectors in Italy, like, for instance, culture, that, was always monopolized by the left. And among these, of course, there is RAI. So this government is trying to overthrow this monopoly. And how is doing this? In the same way that everyone has always done it, putting their people in the places of power. So I think that the real theme now is how these people are selected through, because of merit or because of loyalty. And I'm afraid that loyalty often is the reason why these new people are there. And probably this is the real problem.
Yeah, and Gabriele, does that explain the divisions at RAI when the network accuses its own journalists of peddling fake news?
Well, in a way, yes. Journalists have, always been put under so much pressure to perform in a way that is positive to the government. And while what is true is that in the past it has always happened, what changes is the length at which the Meloni government is going to pursue this kind of influence. So when, for instance, when Berlusconi was in power, similar things happened. It was not so blatantly done en plein air, and it was not at this level of intensity. So now we have journalists being purged directly.
Serena, give us an idea of the Italian landscape for the media. How important is RAI for the average Italian's news intake?
Well, RAI, we could say that is still like the institutional channel. So even if is not the only or the most important channel for information for Italian people, because of course, social media probably is the first source for everyone. But of course, RAI is the institutional one. So it's true that that the powerful information goes through RAI. So and also it's very important that it's also true that any controversies about RAI go big and became something really really important for the public opinion. And also there is another issue that probably is important, that is the second screen, because also a lot of young people started again to watch RAI because of the second screen of social networks. So yeah, for sure it's still important.
Yeah, and Gabriele, you've been covering this topic for a while now. Where do things stand in regards to that that push from leftist politicians to try to get RAI to have more independence from government influence?
Well, we should say that the left has always took part in this, in its own way, in influencing the public broadcaster. But at the same time, there were pushes to reform the network, putting RAI under a foundation, under the control of an independent foundation. But whether so the reform is sitting in the parliament, the problem is that even with a foundation, you might ask the question, like, who will control the foundation? Will it be really independent? Will this solve RAI's problem of being influenced by the government, the current government, by whoever is in power?
Yeah, Serena, next week, June 6th to June 9th, we have the European elections. Italy, a key player in the EU. Meloni trying to tone down the rhetoric after she was coming to power. Is there concern among the Italian public about what's happening in the media industry, or is this just status quo?
Well, I think that, the media discussion is just a part of a bigger problem that people start to see and to discuss, because, there is this cultural attempt that I was trying to explain before. So it's true that this government is trying to, to change things where the power is. So it's trying to change things in culture, in television, and of course in politics. So there are a lot of people that, start to have problem about this. But it's also true that the majority of Italians, we will see next week with the European election, but I think that, large majority of Italian people stand with Meloni and her government.
Yeah, Gabriele, one of the things that was controversial that happened at RAI was the sort of censorship about some of the occasions or the coverage of Liberation Day. Can you tell us about what happened there?
Yeah, well, there was a speech that was scheduled to be aired during Liberation Day from a prominent leftist writer that has written a narrative biography, a fictional biography of Mussolini that is mostly hated by the right, by the right wingers. And what happened is that his speech was censored with a weird excuse, and the TV host bravely decided to say this speech on television, to air the speech, nevertheless, not from the mouth of the writer, but reading herself the speech. And she is now being threatened with disciplinary measures. And rumor has it that she might be fired. So there are consequences when you are not when you are an unaligned journalist in RAI.
All right, Gabriele, I want to thank you. Gabriele di Donfrancesco joining us from Rome, as well as Serena Danna speaking to us from Milan. That brings us to our quote of the week. It comes from Vittorio Di Trapani, who is the president of Italy's National Federation of the Italian Press and Journalists Union. He's told The Guardian, quote, "In Italy, we are witnessing a Hungarian drift. The government controls RAI in an increasingly suffocating manner. From a public service, it is becoming a government service. Then it wants to sell the second biggest news agency to a parliamentarian from the government majority. Italy is increasingly distant from Europe and from the standards of the European Media Freedom Act." That's it for this edition of Scoop. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to France 24.